Have you ever walked into a place expecting simple respect only to be treated as if you didn't belong? Imagine being 16, carrying a check from your family, and instead of being helped, the bank manager calls the police on you. Not because you did anything wrong, but because of how you looked. Now imagine this. What if that teenager's mother walked in? Not just any mother, but the CEO who owns a powerful stake in that very bank. Would you stand quietly? Would you fight back? Or would you wonder if dignity has a price and who gets to decide? This is not just about a deposit. It's about choice, power, and the silent battles so many face every day. If it were you, how would you respond? If it were your child, what would you demand? Stay with us as we unfold a story of quiet courage, sharp consequences, and the kind of justice that doesn't come from anger, but from unwavering dignity. Before we dive in, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that matter, stories that may just change the way we see the world. The marble floor of Jefferson First Trust gleamed like still water under the afternoon sun. It was the kind of bank lobby where whispers carried, where everything from the polished brass door handles to the leather chairs told a silent story of wealth and respectability. At 3:45 p.m., the heavy glass doors slid open, and in stepped a girl who did not seem to fit the picture Patricia Collins thought she knew by heart. 16-year-old Aaliyah Carter walked with measured steps, her Navy school blazer buttoned neatly, a sealed envelope clutched against her chest. Patricia, the branch manager with 15 years of seniority, looked up from behind the premium counter. Her eyes narrowed. She had developed, over decades, what she considered a gift, the ability to spot trouble before it starts. To her, Aaliyah was trouble wrapped in pressed cotton. "Excuse me, young lady?" Patricia's voice rang out, sharp enough to slice through the quiet hum of the lobby. "This section is for premium clients only." Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Aaliyah paused in her stride, her posture perfectly calm. "I have an appointment," she said, her voice low but clear. Patricia let out a laugh that was closer to a scoff. "An appointment with whom? This is a bank, not a high school counseling office. By the ATM machines. A college student, Jasmine Lee, stopped mid-transaction." She had seen enough viral clips online to recognize the tension rising. Slowly, almost instinctively, she raised her phone, tapping the livestream button. Her whisper carried to the first handful of viewers. Bank manager going full Karen on this young girl. "Y'all need to see this." The viewer count blinked from 12 to 25. Back at the counter, Aaliyah's grip on the envelope didn't waver. "I'm here for the Carter Family Trust. Appointment with Mr. Hayes at 4. Her words seemed to ripple across the marble. Patricia leaned forward, her tone louder now, as though performing for the growing audience of curious customers. "The Carter Family Trust. I've worked here for 15 years, and I can assure you, there's no such account. And even if there were, a child like you wouldn't be handling it." The insult hung in the air, heavy and obvious. A middle-aged man in a business suit shifted uncomfortably, lowering his gaze. Aaliyah drew in a quiet breath, then reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. She flipped it open, uncapped a pen, and began to write. Patricia's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Documenting," Aaliyah replied without looking up. "Time, date, names, exact words." Her tone was steady, like someone reading a recipe. No anger, no fear, just precision. That calmness, so unusual in a teenager being humiliated in public, unsettled Patricia in a way she couldn't explain. For a moment, she faltered, but pride stiffened her spine. "Listen," Patricia snapped. "I've seen every trick in the book. You're loitering in the wrong place. This is for serious clients. Now move along before I call security." At that moment, the security guard, Frank Dawson, emerged from behind the service desk, broad-shouldered, moving a little slower than his younger days. He rested his hand on his belt as he approached. "What's the problem here?" Frank asked, his voice gruff but obedient to Patricia's authority. "This girl is disrupting business," Patricia said quickly, pointing at Aaliyah. "Escort her out, please." Aaliyah raised her head, pen still poised over her notebook. "I am standing quietly in line. The only disruption is the assumptions being made about me." For a moment, silence blanketed the lobby. Even Jasmine's live stream caught the hush, the way every ear strained for what would come next. Patricia's cheeks flushed pink. "Assumptions, I am protecting our customers, protecting them from what?" Aaliyah asked softly. The question slipped through the air like smoke, impossible to grasp, impossible to ignore. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed again. The answer she held in her chest could not be spoken aloud. On Jasmine's phone, the viewer count climbed past 100. Comments scrolled faster than her eyes could follow. "This is 2025, not 1955. Get her name tag. Where is this happening?" Frank shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I should just call it in," he muttered. "Do it," Patricia ordered. Her voice carried, sharp and certain, as though sheer volume could drown the gnawing doubt inside her. "Call the cops. Let them deal with her." Aaliyah didn't flinch. She looked down at her watch, an elegant timepiece that glinted under the light, a gift from her mother for her 16th birthday. The digital display ticked to 3:43. She had exactly 17 minutes until her scheduled meeting with the branch president. Her voice, calm and measured, carried across the floor. "If you call the police, I'll wait right here. I have nothing to hide." For some, it was a teenager's defiance. For others, watching silently from their chairs and teller lines, it was something else, a quiet strength that did not need shouting to be heard. Jasmine's live stream counter jumped again. 280 viewers now. Comments flooded in. "This girl is too calm. She knows something. Why won't they just listen to her? Get the receipts. Sis." Aaliyah closed her notebook, slipping it neatly back into her pocket. She looked Patricia Collins directly in the eye and said, "In 15 minutes, this entire situation will be resolved. I suggest you reconsider your approach." Patricia stiffened. Cryptic nonsense. "Frank, call it in. Now." Frank lifted his radio, the static crackling. "Control. This is Dawson at Jefferson First Trust. Need police assistance for a trespassing situation? Somewhere outside." The sound of a distant siren began to rise, and in that moment, caught between the marble walls, the glow of the overhead chandeliers, the watchful eyes of strangers, and the invisible gaze of hundreds watching online, Aaliyah Carter stood tall, her stillness louder than Patricia Collins' shouting. The story had only just begun. The sirens outside grew faint, then closer, until even those in the farthest corners of Jefferson First Trust could hear them. People shifted in their seats, uneasy. Some lowered their heads as if not wanting to be witnesses, while others leaned forward with hungry curiosity. Patricia Collins folded her arms tightly across her chest, the self-satisfied look of someone who believed the system would soon vindicate her. Beside her, Frank Dawson kept one hand near his radio, eyes darting nervously between Aaliyah and the entrance doors. Aaliyah stood steady, her back straight, her breathing measured. She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue. Instead, she tapped the edge of her notebook against her palm as if marking the rhythm of time. At exactly 3:45, she spoke softly, though her words carried across the marble lobby. "I have an appointment with Mr. Hayes in 15 minutes. I'd like to proceed with my deposit." Her calmness was almost unnerving. For many watching, it was the silence that screamed the loudest. Patricia's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Your little performance won't fool anyone. When the officers arrive, they'll see exactly what I see: a child making trouble where she doesn't belong." Aaliyah's gaze didn't waver. "Belonging isn't something you decide for me." The words drew a murmur from a man in a gray suit near the loan desk. He cleared his throat. "Maybe you should just hear her out. She says she has an appointment." Patricia spun toward him, her voice snapping like a whip. "Sir, I've managed this branch for over 15 years. I know who belongs in this lobby and who doesn't." The man shrank back into silence, embarrassed for speaking up. Meanwhile, near the ATMs, Jasmine Lee's live stream continued to grow. Over 600 people were watching now. Her comments section was a storm of outrage. "This is straight-up racism. Why isn't anyone stepping in?" "Stay calm. Sis, you got this," Jasmine whispered into her phone. "She's handling this better than most adults would. It's like she knew this was coming." Back at the counter, Frank shifted his weight, uneasy. "Patricia, maybe we should wait for Mr. Hayes before enough," Patricia snapped. "If we wait, she'll just spin more lies." She turned back to Aaliyah, voice rising. "Show me what's in the envelope. Right now." Aaliyah shook her head. "The contents are confidential. They're for Mr. Hayes' review only." Patricia's face reddened. "Confidential. Don't play games with me. Hand it over or leave." "I'm not leaving," Aaliyah said calmly. Frank took a half step closer. "Miss, maybe it's better if you frank." Patricia cut him off. "Don't let her manipulate you. She's wasting our time. Do your job." Aaliyah lifted her watch slightly, noting the time. 3:47. She spoke without looking up. 12 minutes. Patricia frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "In 12 minutes, Aaliyah said, everything will be clear." The answer rattled Patricia, though she refused to show it. She turned her back on the girl and addressed the room at large. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disturbance. We're handling it." Her attempt at control backfired. A young mother sitting with her toddler frowned. "Handling it? She's just standing there. You're the one making the scene." Patricia whipped around, stunned. She wasn't used to being challenged. Her authority, once unquestioned, now felt fragile in front of dozens of witnesses. And then the doors opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside Officer Daniels, seasoned and calm, and Officer Green, younger, nervous, scanning the room quickly. The air shifted as everyone in the lobby turned to watch. Patricia hurried toward them, relief flooding her voice. "Officers, thank goodness. This girl is trespassing and refuses to leave. She's been causing a disturbance for nearly 15 minutes. The officers looked past her to where Aaliyah stood, still and composed, hands visible at her sides. Daniels raised a brow. "That girl?" "Yes," Patricia insisted. "She's disruptive, and she's lying about having an appointment." Officer Daniels approached Aaliyah. "Miss, can I see some identification? Please." Aaliyah nodded, slowly, carefully. She reached into her blazer pocket and produced her driver's license. She handed it to him with steady hands. "Aaliyah Simone Carter, Daniels read aloud. The address listed was in Riverton Heights, one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. 16 years old. Yes, sir, Aaliyah said. I have a 4 o'clock appointment with Mr. Hayes regarding the Carter Family Trust. I'm here to make a special deposit. Daniel studied her calm expression, then looked at Patricia. Ma'am, what exactly is the problem? Patricia's face tightened. She claims to have an appointment, but clearly she's lying. Look at her. She doesn't belong here. The words slipped out sharper than she intended, and the lobby froze. Everyone knew what she meant. Everyone heard what she hadn't said outright. A hush fell over the room. Jasmine's live stream, now at 1,200 viewers, captured it perfectly, the unspoken prejudice echoing louder than any siren outside. From the back, Mrs. Whitaker, the elderly customer, muttered, "In my day, people knew their place." Jasmine swung her camera toward the woman, catching the comment. Her chat exploded. There it is. The quiet part out loud. Disgusting. She needs to be called out. Officer Green shifted awkwardly. Maybe we should just calm everyone down. Patricia cut in. I want her removed. She's been threatening and disruptive. Daniels looked at Aaliyah again. Have you been threatening anyone? No, sir, Aaliyah replied. She pulled her notebook back out, flipping to the first page. But I am documenting everything. Times, statements, witnesses, and I would like to file a complaint under Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act. Daniels blinked, taken aback. Most teenagers wouldn't know federal statutes, much less quote them in the middle of a confrontation. You want to file a complaint? He asked carefully. Yes, Aaliyah said. Against Ms. Collins and this bank? For denying me service based on race. Patricia sputtered. Race has nothing to do with this. She's not. She doesn't. But her words tangled in her throat, betraying the truth. The tension hung heavy, pressing down on every ear in the room. A customer near the teller line whispered, She's digging her own grave. On Jasmine's phone. The counter ticked past 2 hours. Her viewers flooded the feed. This girl is brilliant. Get her badge number now. History is being made in this lobby. Aaliyah closed her notebook once more, slipping it carefully back into her pocket. She stood straighter, her chin slightly lifted. Officer Daniels, she said evenly, my appointment is scheduled to begin in 8 minutes. I will wait until Mr. Hayes is available. Daniels looked around at the silent, watching crowd. Something about this didn't feel right. And behind his glass office wall, Robert Hayes, the branch president, finally rose from his desk. His stomach churned. He had heard every word, seen every gesture. The sirens, the police, the live stream. It was spiraling out of control. For the first time, he truly looked at the girl. Something about her eyes, the steadiness in her voice, seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it yet. He straightened his tie, heart pounding. It was 3:52. In 8 minutes, everything would change. The sirens faded into silence outside, but the weight of the moment hung in the air. Officer Daniels kept one hand on his belt, his eyes narrowing as he glanced between Aaliyah and Patricia Collins. He sensed something wasn't adding up, yet Patricia pressed forward, determined to make her authority stick. She's wasting everyone's time, Patricia insisted, her words sharp and clipped. You've seen her license, but trust me, this is all an act. She's been disruptive, and I don't believe a word she says. Daniels didn't respond immediately. He studied Aaliyah again. Her shoulders remained relaxed, her breathing steady. Most kids would have been shaking under the weight of flashing lights and a lobby full of eyes. But she wasn't. She looked like someone who knew she belonged there, someone who was waiting for time itself to prove her right. Aaliyah broke the silence. "May I ask something? Officer Daniels." He gave a short nod. "Did she report me as suspicious or as trespassing?" Daniels hesitated, then answered honestly. "The call came in as suspicious trespass." Aaliyah tilted her head. "So I'm suspicious because I walked in the front door of a bank where I have an appointment." Patricia cut in, flustered. "Don't twist this," I called, "because your behavior." "What behavior?" Aaliyah's voice was calm, but it carried. "I walked in. I stood in line. I said I had an appointment. That's all. The rest came from your assumptions." Gas rippled through the lobby. It wasn't just her words, but the composure with which she delivered them. Patricia looked cornered, and the crowd knew it. From the back, "Mrs." Whitaker muttered again. "She's playing games. These people always find a way to make themselves the victim." Jasmine Lee swung her phone toward the woman, catching every word. The comments on her live stream exploded. "That older lady just said it out loud. This is why we can't stay silent. Ah, keep rolling. Jasmine, the world needs to see this." Patricia grew more desperate. "Officers, I'm telling you, she's lying. She's making things up to embarrass me. Just escort her out so we can move on." Aaliyah took one careful step forward, her eyes fixed on Patricia. "Would you like me to prove it right now?" Patricia faltered. "Prove? What, that I have an appointment? That I have business here worth more than this entire lobby combined?" The confidence in her tone was so matter-of-fact it rattled Patricia. She stammered, "You can't possibly," before she could finish. Aaliyah slipped the envelope from her arm and held it close. "Inside here is a check for $2.5 million. It belongs to the Carter Family Trust. It's to be deposited today." The words landed like thunder. Customers in the lobby froze. Frank Dawson's mouth fell open. Officer Green looked at Daniels in disbelief. Jasmine's live stream counter soared to over 3,500. Patricia blinked, her face draining of color. 2 million? 2.5, Aaliyah corrected softly. "And a signed letter from the trustees. If you had allowed me to reach Mr. Hayes on time, none of this would have been necessary." Daniels leaned back slightly, his eyes wide. "You're telling us you came here to deposit $2.5 million. "Yes," Aaliyah replied, "for the trust my family established years ago, which means this bank has been benefiting from our assets long before today." The lobby seemed to shrink in on itself. Every breath, every shuffle of a shoe, echoed louder. Patricia sputtered, desperate to regain control. "Nonsense! That's impossible. She's bluffing." Aaliyah's eyes met hers. "Would you like to open the envelope and see for yourself?" The challenge hung between them. Patricia's hands trembled. If she opened the envelope and the check was real, she would be exposed as having humiliated one of the bank's most important clients. If she refused, she'd look like she was hiding. Either way, she was cornered. She tried to salvage ground. Even if you had a check, that doesn't prove you belong here. You could have stolen it, forged it. Daniels cut her off, his voice low. "Ma'am, maybe you should stop talking." The officer's tone was firm, the kind reserved for situations where someone was about to dig their own grave. Patricia's mouth snapped shut. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, her calm steadying the entire room. "I don't expect you to believe me," she said, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. "Not yet. But in 5 minutes, Mr. Hayes will walk out of that office, and you'll see. Her voice softened. The question is when the truth comes out. How will you explain the way you treated me before you knew who I was? The silence that followed was deafening. Jasmine whispered into her phone. She just flipped it on them. Did y'all hear that this girl is 16? Comments flooded the feed. Goosebumps. She's teaching them a lesson right here. Patricia's career is done. This is history in real time. Officer Daniels shifted, visibly moved. He glanced at Aaliyah, then at his partner. We're going to wait for Mr. Hayes. Nobody's leaving. Nobody's being escorted out. Officer Green nodded reluctantly. Patricia's eyes widened. You can't be serious. You're taking her side. Daniels frowned. I'm not taking sides. I'm letting the truth reveal itself. If she's lying, we'll know soon enough. If she's not. His words trailed, but the implication was clear. Patricia's confidence cracked. For the first time, she looked unsure of herself, as if realizing the ground beneath her feet might be crumbling. Aaliyah adjusted her blazer, then quietly returned the envelope to her arm. She checked her watch again. 3:56. 4 minutes left. She looked around the lobby, meeting the eyes of strangers who just minutes ago had doubted her. Some lowered their gaze in shame. Others nodded faintly, as if silently rooting for her. Patricia shifted uncomfortably, her once proud posture now sagging. She muttered under her breath, "This isn't happening. This isn't happening." But it was, and the live stream was capturing every second. By the time the minute hand clicked forward again, Jasmine's counter flashed 5,000 live viewers. The story had escaped the marble walls of Jefferson First Trust. It was no longer just a confrontation in a lobby. It was a reckoning, streaming into phones and homes across the country. At exactly 3:59, a shadow moved behind the frosted glass of the president's office. Robert Hayes, face pale, straightened his tie and reached for the door handle. And in that moment, Patricia Collins' confidence shattered completely. The door to the president's office creaked open, and Robert Hayes stepped into the lobby. He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed confrontation. His days were usually spent signing documents, approving loans, and shaking hands with clients whose names appeared on brass plaques. But today, he walked into something far heavier than paperwork. His eyes swept across the room. 2 police officers, a girl in a school blazer, his branch manager with her lips pressed tight, and a lobby full of customers watching like it was theater. His chest tightened. "Mr. Hayes." Patricia nearly leapt forward, relief spilling out of her voice. "Thank goodness you're here. I was just dealing with this disruption." Hayes frowned, glancing at Aaliyah. Something about her composure didn't fit Patricia's story. He turned to Daniels. "What exactly is happening here?" Daniels explained briefly a 911 call for trespassing. Suspicion, a teenager claiming she had an appointment. Hayes' stomach dropped. He looked at his watch. 4 sharp. He knew whose name was on his calendar. Aaliyah lifted her chin slightly. "Mr. Hayes. I'm Aaliyah Carter. I believe we had an appointment." A murmur rippled through the lobby. Jasmine's livestream viewer count jumped past 7,000. Hayes swallowed hard. Yes, we did." Patricia froze. "What she's telling the truth," Hayes said. His voice cracked slightly, but he steadied it. "I was expecting her." Patricia blinked rapidly, her face draining of color. That can't be right. She's just a child." Hayes shot her a look that carried both warning and disappointment. "Ms. Collins, I think you've said enough. But Aaliyah wasn't finished. She reached into her blazer, removed the sealed envelope, and handed it directly to Hayes. "This is the deposit for the Carter Family Trust. $2.5 million, as agreed." Hayes opened the envelope carefully. His eyes widened at the figure printed across the check. It was real, very real. He looked up, his face pale. "Thank you, Aaliyah. This is substantial." The crowd buzzed, whispers bouncing across marble walls. Jasmine whispered into her phone, "Y'all, she wasn't lying. $2.5 million. I can't believe what I'm seeing." The chat exploded. Game over for Patricia. "This girl is a queen. Somebody clip this right now." Patricia stumbled backward, shaking her head. "This doesn't make sense. How could she?" Aaliyah's voice cut clean through the noise. "Because you assumed. You saw a black teenager and decided I couldn't possibly belong here." Patricia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, she was utterly speechless. Officer Daniels shifted his stance, his expression unreadable. "Miss Carter, do you wish to file a formal complaint?" "Yes," Aaliyah said calmly. "I'd like to begin that process immediately, but I think my mother would prefer to address this personally." Hayes' stomach dropped further. He had almost forgotten the second half of the appointment. "Your mother?" Daniels asked. "Yes," Aaliyah replied. "Dr. Simone Carter, CEO of Carter Global Holdings." The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Even the chandeliers seemed to hum with the weight of it. Jasmine gasped into her phone. "Oh my God, her mom's a CEO." Patricia's knees buckled. She gripped the edge of the counter for support. No, that can't be. Hayes knew better. He had seen her name on shareholder documents countless times. He had just never imagined he'd witness her power revealed this way. The silence was pierced by the buzz of Hayes' phone. He glanced down. The caller ID, Dr. Simone Carter. His throat tightened. He answered quickly, putting her on speaker at Aaliyah's request. "Mr. Hayes." Simone's voice was calm, crisp, and commanding. "Would you like to explain why my daughter is standing in your lobby surrounded by police officers?" Hayes stammered, "Dr. Carter, I assure you, this is a misunderstanding. I wasn't aware." "You weren't aware," Simone interrupted. "My daughter walked in for a scheduled appointment with $2.5 million in assets, and instead of being greeted, she was harassed, humiliated, and treated as a criminal. On my bank's floor." Her words reverberated, sharp as glass breaking. Patricia whispered hoarsely, I didn't know she was your daughter." "That's the problem," Simone said. "Respect shouldn't depend on last names or net worth. It should be the standard for every customer who walks through those doors." The lobby erupted in murmurs of agreement. Jasmine's live stream counter hit 10,000. Daniels lowered his gaze. Even he, a veteran officer, felt the weight of her words. Simone's voice hardened. "Here's what's going to happen. First, Ms. Collins will be relieved of her duties effective immediately. Second, every employee in that branch will undergo mandatory anti-bias and dignity training within 30 days. Third, the bank will establish a $1 million community fund for financial literacy in Riverton." Patricia's lips quivered. "Please, Dr. Carter, I didn't mean you meant every word you said," Simone replied coldly. "And now you'll live with the consequences." A hush fell again. Customers stared. Police officers exchanged glances, and Patricia Collins sagged under the weight of her collapse. Aaliyah finally spoke, her voice softer but firm. "Respect isn't optional. It's the minimum." The phrase landed like scripture. etched into the air. Hayes adjusted his tie, his hands trembling. He nodded at Aaliyah. "We'll proceed with your deposit immediately, and I'll personally oversee the compliance of Dr. Carter's directives." The room exhaled collectively, as though a storm had passed, but everyone knew it was only the beginning. By the time Simone ended the call, Jasmine's live stream had crossed 12,000 viewers, and the comments weren't just about outrage anymore. They were about change, about accountability, about justice. For Patricia Collins, there was no coming back. For Aaliyah, the moment had transformed her from just a teenager into something else, a mirror held up to society, forcing everyone to see what they would rather ignore. And for Simone Carter, watching from her office downtown, the battle had only begun. The lobby of Jefferson First Trust Bank no longer felt like a place of polished marble and quiet transactions. It had become a stage. Every breath, every word, every glance carried the weight of judgment. Jasmine's phone vibrated in her hand as notifications stacked one on top of another. Her live stream chat was a waterfall of disbelief and righteous fury. "I'm screen recording," this one viewer wrote. Another chimed in. "Tag CNN. They need to see this." Across the room, Officer Green leaned toward Daniels, whispering, Do we stay? Or... His voice carried that nervous edge of a rookie realizing he was on the wrong side of history. Daniels, older and wiser, muttered, "We stay until it's clear this isn't our scene anymore." Patricia stood rigid, her hands trembling on the counter. The security guard, Frank Dawson, lingered nearby, unsure of his role now that the balance of power had shifted. He looked at Patricia, then at Aaliyah, then down at his shoes. Aaliyah, still calm, pulled out her notebook. She began jotting down everything times, names, comments she'd overheard. Her pen moved steadily, like a heartbeat. The small act unnerved Patricia more than shouting ever could. "What are you writing?" Patricia snapped, her voice shrill. Aaliyah didn't look up. The truth. The words were quiet, but they carried like thunder across the marble floor. Robert Hayes rubbed his temples. He could feel sweat gathering at the base of his neck. He knew corporate was already aware. By now, the viral clip would be making its rounds in boardrooms, on trading floors, maybe even on Capitol Hill. Banks did not survive this kind of publicity unscathed. As if to confirm his fear, his phone buzzed again, another text from headquarters. "Prepare official statement. Board emergency call tonight." He swallowed hard, then looked at Aaliyah. She was just 16, and yet handling the moment with a kind of poise that seasoned executives struggled to muster. Patricia finally broke. "I didn't mean it like that I was protecting the bank. Anyone could have walked in with a fake check." Jasmine's camera caught every word. The comments section ignited. "She's doubling down instead of apologizing. Protecting the bank from a child. Seriously, this lady is finished." Aaliyah raised her eyes at last. Protecting the bank means protecting its customers, not humiliating them. If you had asked instead of assumed, none of this would have happened. The lobby grew silent. It was the kind of silence that precedes a verdict. Hayes cleared his throat. "Miss Collins, I think it's best if you step away for now." Patricia's eyes widened. "Step away, Robert. You can't just..." "Yes, I can," he said, firmer this time. "You've compromised this branch, this bank, and the trust of every person in this lobby. Step away." She froze, then slowly retreated from the counter. The sound of her heels on the marble echoed louder than any siren. Frank Dawson, sensing the shift, muttered, "Ma'am, maybe you should, you know." Go home." The look Patricia shot him could have curdled milk, but she said nothing more. Aaliyah folded her notebook closed, then looked at Hayes. "Shall we process the deposit now?" He nodded quickly. "Yes. Yes. Of course. Right this way." The two of them moved toward his office. Customers parted to let her pass. For a moment, Aaliyah felt the strange weight of dozens of eyes on her, not as an intruder, but as someone who had commanded the room. Inside Hayes's office, the leather chairs, mahogany desk, and framed certificates suddenly felt like props in a theater. He gestured for her to sit. She did, with a steadiness that unsettled him further. "Miss Carter," he began carefully, "I want to apologize on behalf of this institution. What happened out there? It was unacceptable." Aaliyah tilted her head. "It wasn't just unacceptable. It was predictable. That's worse." Hayes winced. She was right. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. A message from her mother. "On my way. 15 minutes. Don't leave." She typed back. "Already handled most of it. But you'll want to see Jasmine. Still outside the office, but close enough to keep filming through the glass," whispered to her livestream audience. "Y'all, the mom's coming. The CEO. It's about to get even bigger." Her viewer count hit 15,000. Out in the lobby, the atmosphere had changed. Customers were whispering among themselves, some shaking their heads at Patricia's behavior, others murmuring about Aaliyah's composure. Even Mrs. Whitaker, the elderly woman who had muttered earlier about knowing your place, seemed visibly shaken. She gathered her purse and left quietly, her face pale. Officer Daniels finally approached Hayes's office door. "Sir, if there's nothing further for us here, we'll clear the scene." Hayes nodded gratefully. "Thank you, officers. That will be all." As the police left, Jasmine whispered, "You see that they're backing off. They know she's in the right." Patricia, meanwhile, sat slumped in a chair near the teller line. Her phone vibrated again and again, texts from colleagues, her sister, even her teenage son. She glanced at one message that made her stomach drop. "Mom, is that you on TikTok? Everyone's sharing it at school." Her chest tightened. The world she had built 15 years of service, stability, reputation was collapsing in real time, broadcast live to thousands. In Hayes's office, Aaliyah slid the check across the desk. "This needs to be processed before I meet my mother downtown. Can you guarantee it'll be done?" Hayes nodded quickly, his hands trembling slightly as he prepared the paperwork. "Yes, Miss Carter. I'll process it personally." She studied him quietly. He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "Mr. Hayes," she said finally, "do you believe this bank is ready to change? Or do you think you'll wait for the storm to pass and go back to business as usual?" His mouth went dry. I don't know." She leaned forward. "You'll need to decide soon, because the storm isn't passing. Not this time." Her phone buzzed again, this time a call. She answered softly. "Hi, Mom. Yes, I'm in his office. Yes, everything's documented. Okay, see you soon." The look on Hayes's face when he realized Simone Carter was minutes away was enough to tell the whole story. His world was about to tilt. Outside, Jasmine whispered into her phone, "She's only 16, but she talks like she's been through this 1,000 times. Imagine being that young and having to carry yourself like that just to be heard. That's why this story matters." The comments agreed, flooding the feed with support, outrage, and admiration. By the time Simone Carter walked through the bank's glass doors, the live stream had surpassed 20,000 viewers, and every single one of them was waiting to see what would happen when a mother, a CEO, and a woman who had built an empire out of resilience finally stood face to face with the institution that had dared to humiliate her daughter. The lobby of Jefferson First Trust had fallen into an uneasy hush, the kind that follows a storm but hints at another on the horizon. Every set of eyes turned as the glass doors slid open. Dr. Simone Carter stepped inside. At 48, she carried herself with the calm authority of someone who had fought too many battles to be rattled by another. Her tailored navy suit was simple yet commanding, her hair pulled neatly back, her heels striking the marble floor with measured precision. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The air seemed to adjust to her presence. Jasmine whispered to her phone. "She's here, the CEO, Aaliyah's mom." Her livestream viewer count shot up past 25,000. Patricia Collins shrank in her seat, her earlier defiance draining into something closer to dread. She smoothed her skirt with trembling hands, as though neatness could shield her from what was coming. Aaliyah rose from Hayes' office chair. Her expression softened when she saw her mother. For a moment, she looked like what she was, a 16-year-old girl, relieved to see a familiar face. But then her shoulders squared again, matching her mother's poise. Simone crossed the lobby and entered Hayes' office without knocking. She placed her leather bag on the desk, unlatched it slowly, then looked straight at Hayes. "Explain." Hayes swallowed hard. "Dr. Carter, there was a breakdown in judgment. Ms. Collins here believed your daughter did not stop." Simone cut in, her voice sharp but even. "Don't dilute it. Call it what it was." Hayes faltered. He had been in boardrooms where billions hung in the balance, but he had never felt pressure like this. It was discrimination. Simone finished for him, plain, obvious, and dangerous. A hush lingered after her words. Even through the office glass, the lobby's bystanders leaned closer, trying to catch every syllable. Patricia finally stood, her voice trembling. "Dr. Carter, I never intended." "You intended exactly what you said," Simone replied. Her gaze was unwavering. "You looked at my daughter, saw only skin and age, and decided she couldn't possibly belong here." Patricia's lips trembled. "I made a mistake." "A mistake," Simone repeated. Her voice carried the weight of centuries of that same word being used to excuse cruelty. "A mistake is forgetting to sign a form. This was a decision, a series of them." Jasmine's camera zoomed in slightly, capturing Simone's steady profile. The chat filled with fire emojis, hearts, and comments like she's schooling them without shouting. Aaliyah spoke then, her tone quiet but firm. "Mom, she called the police before she even checked the schedule. She called me a liar in front of everyone." Simone's eyes flickered to her daughter, a brief flash of protective fire, then back to Patricia. "You called the police on a child who was your client. Do you understand what could have happened?" Patricia blinked rapidly, realizing too late. The officers had left peacefully, but the story could have ended with handcuffs or worse. Hayes ran a hand through his hair, his nerves fraying. "Dr. Carter, I assure you, we're prepared to take corrective action immediately." "You'll do more than that," Simone replied. She opened her bag and removed a slim folder, placing it on the desk. "Here are my terms." Patricia paled. Hayes stared at the folder like it was a live wire. "First," Simone said, her tone deliberate, "Ms. Collins is terminated. Effective now. No severance." Patricia gasped. But Simone raised a hand. "You can appeal to corporate HR if you'd like. They already have the live stream. Hayes nodded grimly, jotting notes. Second, Simone continued, this branch will fund a community reinvestment initiative, $1 million annually focused on financial literacy in underserved neighborhoods. The Carter family will match your contribution for the first year. Consider it a joint effort. Hayes blinked. It was both a punishment and a lifeline, a way to save face while also forcing accountability. Third, Simone said, her eyes fixed on him, quarterly audits of equity and customer service will be conducted. By my daughter? Gas rippled through the lobby. Jasmine nearly dropped her phone. Did y'all hear that the daughter's going to run the audits? Hayes hesitated, then nodded again. He had no leverage left. Patricia sank back into her chair, her world unraveling thread by thread. Simone leaned forward slightly, her voice softening but losing none of its power. And fourth, a public apology on every platform. This isn't just about my family. It's about the countless others who don't have the means to fight back. Hayes scribbled furiously. Understood. Aaliyah slid her notebook across the desk. I've already written a draft complaint citing Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act. But if the bank complies fully with my mother's terms, I'll consider withdrawing it. Hayes looked at her in stunned silence. 16, and already wielding the law like a seasoned attorney. Patricia's voice cracked. Please, I have children in college, a mortgage. This job is my life. Aaliyah looked at her, eyes steady. So was my dignity. The room fell into silence again, heavy, almost unbearable. Then Simone stood, her presence filling every inch of space. Mr. Hayes, process my daughter's deposit now. He nodded quickly, signaling to an assistant to finalize the transaction. As the printer spat out the receipt, Aaliyah folded it neatly and slipped it into her blazer pocket. She looked at Patricia one last time. I hope someday you understand that people are not defined by the assumptions you make about them. Patricia's eyes brimmed with tears. For the first time, she seemed to grasp that this was not just about losing her job, but about losing the illusion that her worldview had ever been safe. Outside the office, the live stream had reached 30,000 viewers. The comments came faster than Jasmine could read. This is history. This is how you change the game. A mother and daughter just rewrote the rules. As Simone and Aaliyah exited Hayes' office together, the crowd parted silently, like a congregation before a procession. The moment was no longer about humiliation. It was about transformation. And though the day was far from over, everyone in that building knew they had just witnessed something that would ripple far beyond those marble walls. By the time Simone and Aaliyah stepped back into the lobby, the bank no longer felt like a financial institution. It felt like a courtroom, with the public as judge and jury. Every phone camera was raised, every whisper laced with anticipation. Jasmine's live stream numbers ticked higher and higher, 30,000 then 40,000. The chat scrolled so quickly it blurred. Put this on Twitter, tag MSNBC. This is justice unfolding in real time. Simone's voice cut cleanly through the hum. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to address you directly. The bystanders quieted instantly. Even Frank Dawson, who usually avoided attention, straightened as if standing for roll call. This bank, Simone began, is not just marble floors and glass walls. It is supposed to be a place where trust lives. Today, that trust was broken in front of all of you. She didn't raise her voice. The power came from her steadiness, her refusal to flinch. Jasmine whispered to her phone. She's not just talking to the people here. She's talking to the world. Patricia Collins, still seated near the teller line, pressed her trembling hands together. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Simone continued, "What happened to my daughter isn't rare. It's not new. But today, it was caught on camera. Today, there will be accountability." The crowd nodded, murmurs of agreement spreading like ripples. Mrs. Whitaker had slipped out earlier, but her absence made the point sharper. Those who once muttered prejudice in public now thought twice when the world was watching. Robert Hayes lingered by his office door, watching the situation unfold. Every word Simone spoke was both a lifeline and a threat. If he followed her lead, perhaps the bank would survive. If not, the fallout would bury them all. Aaliyah stepped forward then, her voice steady but softer than her mother's. "I'm 16. I came here to make a deposit, not a statement. But when I was told I didn't belong, when the police were called on me, I realized I didn't have a choice. My dignity demanded I stand my ground." Her words landed heavy. Parents in the crowd exchanged looks with their own children. Some pulled out tissues. The live stream chat exploded with messages. "This girl speaks better than most politicians. Protect her at all costs." Patricia finally broke her silence. I know I failed. I thought I was protecting the bank, but I see now I was protecting my own prejudice. I can't undo it." For the first time that day, Simone's expression softened barely. Admitting fault is the first step, but accountability requires more than words. Hayes stepped forward, sensing his cue. His voice trembled slightly, but he projected it across the lobby. "As branch president, I want to acknowledge publicly the wrong done here today. On behalf of Jefferson First Trust, I apologize to Miss Carter, to Dr. Carter, and to this community. Immediate changes will be made." Jasmine zoomed in on him. The comments surged. "He's only saying this because he's cornered. Still, this is the power of exposure. Accountability live." Simone nodded curtly. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. But apologies without action are empty. The world will measure you not by what you say today, but by what you do tomorrow." Frank Dawson cleared his throat awkwardly. "Dr. Carter, Miss Carter, I just want to say, I followed orders, but I should have used my own judgment. I'm sorry." Aaliyah looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You still had a choice. Remember that next time?" The words were firm, but not cruel. Even Frank felt the sting of truth without humiliation. Suddenly, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a notification she couldn't ignore. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God. Y'all. How banking? While Black is trending #1 nationwide." The crowd buzzed. Even those who hadn't understood the weight of the moment now realized they were part of something far bigger. Hayes's phone chimed repeatedly, emails, texts, missed calls. His face paled as he read one subject line aloud. "By accident, board demands crisis response plan." Simone raised her chin. "The board can call me directly. They know who owns the largest share of this bank." The statement hit harder than any threat. It was fact, undeniable and inescapable. Patricia buried her face in her hands. The very institution she thought she was defending had been owned, all along, by the woman she had insulted. Aaliyah stepped closer to her mother. "Mom, I think people need to hear something else from you, not just consequences, but why this matters." Simone studied her daughter for a long moment, then nodded. She turned back to the crowd. "This isn't about vengeance. It's about building institutions that serve everyone. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's expensive. It costs businesses, customers, credibility, and survival. That is why change will come, whether willingly or by force." The applause that followed wasn't loud or raucous. It was steady, insistent, like a heartbeat. Jasmine whispered, "You're watching history. Remember this moment." Aaliyah glanced around the lobby, her eyes resting briefly on every face sympathetic, ashamed, inspired. "These stories matter," she said clearly. "Not because we're asking for special treatment, but because we're demanding equal treatment. That's what justice means." The crowd erupted into applause this time. Louder, undeniable. Phones captured every second. Hayes, standing off to the side, felt the enormity of it. This wasn't just a PR crisis anymore. This was a turning point, and whether he liked it or not, the Carter family now held the blueprint. Patricia sat frozen, her career dissolving before her eyes. But even she understood this wasn't just about her. It was about the system she had upheld without question. When Simone and Aaliyah finally moved toward the exit, the entire lobby shifted. Some customers reached out to shake their hands. Others simply stepped aside, making a clear path. Jasmine followed close behind, her camera capturing every step. Outside, the autumn sun glinted off the bank's glass facade. Aaliyah looked up at it one last time, her reflection staring back at her. For the first time all day, she allowed herself a small, private smile. The live-stream chat surged with comments as the Carters stepped into the sunlight icons. Game changers. This is how you rewrite history. Inside, Robert Hayes exhaled for what felt like the first time all afternoon. He knew the work ahead would be grueling, humiliating even. But he also knew one truth Simone had forced him to face. There was no going back to business as usual. News of the confrontation spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, Riverton was buzzing. The clip of Patricia calling the police on Aaliyah had been reshared millions of times, appearing on national news broadcasts, podcasts, and late-night monologues. At Jefferson First Trust Bank's headquarters, executives gathered for an emergency board meeting. The conference room brimmed with tension. Robert Hayes sat at the far end of the table, still reeling from the chaos at his branch. Patricia Collins wasn't there. Her termination letter had already been signed. The board chair, a graying man named Leonard Price, rubbed his forehead. "We're facing a reputational crisis of the highest order. Jefferson First is synonymous with discrimination today, not stability. Our stock dropped 8% overnight." Another executive flipped through a thick stack of social media transcripts. Banking. While Black has over 100 million impressions, people aren't just angry, they're canceling accounts. Robert Hayes cleared his throat nervously. "Doctor, Carter has issued her terms. If we comply quickly, we may be able to salvage the damage." Leonard's eyes narrowed. "Her terms," Hayes nodded, sliding the folder across the polished wood. "Termination of Ms. Collins, community reinvestment, quarterly equity audits led by her daughter, and a public apology." The room erupted with murmurs. Some executives scoffed. Others shook their heads. One slammed his pen on the table. "She wants to use her daughter as some kind of auditor." One man sneered. "Better that," Hayes replied quietly, "than a class action lawsuit and federal investigation." The room fell silent. They all knew he was right. Meanwhile, in a modest cafe downtown, Jasmine Lee sat with her laptop open. She had uploaded the full 2-hour live stream to YouTube. The views climbed by the second. Comments flooded in, not just from Riverton, but from across the world. "You don't understand," she told her roommate excitedly. "This isn't just a viral clip. This is a movement. People are sharing their own stories in the comments, stories of being profiled in banks, grocery stores, even schools." Her roommate leaned over her shoulder, Scrolling through. Listen to this one. I was accused of trying to cash a fake paycheck. I was a nurse in scrubs. Or this one. They said I didn't look like I could afford the account I wanted. It's everywhere. Jasmine leaned back, her heart pounding. She hadn't meant to spark a movement, but she felt the responsibility of it now. At the Carter home that evening, Aaliyah curled up on the couch, exhaustion finally settling into her bones. She had spent the day replying to messages, finishing schoolwork, and trying to process the tidal wave of attention. Simone entered, carrying 2 mugs of chamomile tea. She set one beside her daughter and sat down. "You did well," Simone said softly. Aaliyah exhaled, staring at the steam curling from her mug. "I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired of proving I belong." Simone reached over, squeezing her hand. "That tiredness is the weight of history. Baby, but you turned it into power. Most adults couldn't have done what you did yesterday." Aaliyah looked at her mother, her eyes searching. "Do you think anything will actually change? Or will this just be another video people watch, get angry about, and then forget?" Simone paused. She had asked herself the same question many times in her career. Change doesn't come in one moment. But moments like this stack up. They chip away at the walls until the walls fall. And you, Aaliyah, just struck a very big crack. That night, the national news aired a segment titled "Banking While Black a Teen Story Sparks National Debate." Footage from Jasmine's livestream played beside interviews with community leaders and financial experts. The anchor's voice carried the weight of the moment. What began as a routine bank visit has become a catalyst for systemic change. Robert Hayes watched the segment alone in his office. He felt the gravity of Simone's words pressing on him. Apologies without action are empty. He knew the next weeks would determine not just his career, but whether Jefferson First survived at all. Across town, Patricia Collins sat in her darkened kitchen, her phone buzzing with messages she couldn't bear to read. Her teenage son's words cut deepest. "Mom, everyone's talking about you at school. They're saying you're racist. I don't know how to face them." Patricia buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. For the first time, she realized the ripple of her actions reached not just strangers, but her own family. Meanwhile, Simone drafted an op-ed for the New York Times. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, every sentence sharpened by both intellect and lived experience. "My daughter's experience at Jefferson First Trust," she wrote, "is not isolated. It is a symptom of a disease baked into the walls of too many institutions. We cannot afford to treat discrimination as a public relations inconvenience. It is a moral failing, and one that erodes the very foundation of trust upon which finance depends." She ended with a call to action. The cost of dignity is non-negotiable. Banks, corporations, and institutions must decide whether they will pay now, or whether society will make them pay later. The piece would publish the next morning, adding fuel to a fire already raging. In the Carter household, Aaliyah finally drifted to sleep. For once, her dreams weren't filled with fear of being doubted or dismissed. Instead, she dreamed of walking into places where no one questioned her presence, where respect was automatic, where dignity was the baseline, not the exception. And though she was only 16, she understood something vital. She had not just survived a moment. She had created a crack in the wall. And walls, no matter how high, eventually crumble. The next morning, Jefferson First Trust's headquarters was a hive of panic. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, cameras flashing as executives slipped through back entrances to avoid questions. The New York Times op-ed by Simone Carter had dropped at sunrise, and it wasn't just trending. It was shaping the conversation across the nation. On the 23rd floor, Leonard Price slammed the newspaper down on the glossy conference table. "She's dismantling us in public. If we don't act decisively, this bank will bleed out." Robert Hayes sat 2 chairs down, his tie slightly crooked from lack of sleep. "Act decisively doesn't mean defensively. If we go after Dr. Carter, we'll look like fools. The public already sees her as the face of justice." An older board member, Marjorie Kane, adjusted her glasses. "Then perhaps we lean into it, accept her terms, add to them even, and try to rebuild trust." Leonard's jaw tightened. "And hand over control of our public image to her," Hayes answered quietly. "She already controls it." The room fell into tense silence. Meanwhile, at Riverton High, Aaliyah tried to settle into a semblance of normalcy. Her locker was plastered with Post-it notes from classmates. "You inspire me. Thank you for speaking up. Keep shining." But not every message was kind. A crumpled piece of notebook paper fell out when she opened the door. "Stop playing the victim." She sighed, stuffing it into her bag before anyone else could see. Hero or villain, she thought. People will always choose their side. In the cafeteria, Jasmine joined her with 2 trays of food. She grinned, pushing one toward Aaliyah. "You're famous. Did you see your mom's op-ed? Half my professors are talking about it." Aaliyah poked at her salad. "I didn't ask to be famous." "Maybe not," Jasmine said. "But sometimes we don't choose the fight. The fight chooses us." Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of a guidance counselor who asked Aaliyah to step into the hallway. Her heart sank, but when she stepped out, she was met by her debate coach holding a printout. "They want you on Good Morning America," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "Live. Tomorrow." Aaliyah blinked. "Me, yes. You," he said. "Simone Carter may be the CEO. But you're the face of this story. They want to hear from the teenager who stood her ground." Her pulse quickened. The idea of speaking on national television made her palms sweat. But she also knew there was power in saying yes. That evening, in the Carter household, Simone and Aaliyah sat at the kitchen table going over talking points. Simone's calm demeanor didn't mask the flicker of concern in her eyes. "Remember," Simone said, "you don't need to sound like a politician. Just be yourself. Speak your truth. That's what people connected with at the bank." Aaliyah fidgeted with her pen. "What if I freeze? Or what if I say the wrong thing?" Simone leaned forward. "The only wrong thing you could say is nothing at all. Silence has never saved us. Honesty has. Across town." Patricia Collins stared at her own reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles ringed her eyes from sleepless nights. The internet had not been kind. Former colleagues stopped returning her calls. Even the grocery store felt hostile. She swore people whispered when she walked past. Her son avoided her, eating meals in his room. His disappointment a wound deeper than any headline. She tried drafting an apology for social media, but couldn't find words that didn't sound hollow. What good are words when trust is gone, she thought bitterly. Back at headquarters, Leonard Price convened a smaller meeting with Hayes and Marjorie. "We need to decide, do we resist, or do we embrace the stocks down another 3%? Analysts are calling this the Carter effect." Marjorie tapped her pen against her notebook. "Embrace. Make Aaliyah's audits a headline, not a humiliation. Frame it as innovation," Hayes added. "And if we resist, we'll become the cautionary tale every business textbook warns about." Leonard exhaled heavily. "Fine. But if we're going to embrace, We do it on our terms. Let's see if Dr. Carter will meet us halfway. The following morning, millions tuned in to Good Morning America. Aaliyah sat on the brightly lit set, a little stiff in the chair, but her voice steady as she answered questions. "Why didn't you just walk away?" the host asked. "Because if I walked away, I'd be saying they were right, that I didn't belong." Aaliyah replied, "And I do belong. Everyone does." Her words were clipped into sound bites that flooded social media within minutes. 16 years old and wiser than most adults, she speaks for all of us. Simone watched from backstage, her hands clasped tightly. She felt pride swell in her chest, but also fear of the weight now placed on her daughter's shoulders. By noon, hashtag shifted from outrage to action. Carter Challenge trended, encouraging people to share stories of times they demanded dignity in everyday life. It wasn't just about banks anymore. It was about stores, schools, hospitals, every institution where respect had been denied. Robert Hayes scrolled through the post during his lunch break, shaking his head in disbelief. What began in his branch lobby was reshaping national discourse, and somewhere deep inside, despite his fear, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this could be more than survival. Maybe it could be transformation. But in another corner of Riverton, Patricia Collins sat at her kitchen table staring at her unopened mail, a notice from the unemployment office, a letter from her mortgage company, and a message from her pastor urging her to reflect on her choices. She clenched her fists. "One mistake," she muttered, but even as she said it, she knew it was more than one. It was years of unchecked bias, years of small cruelties she had dismissed as professionalism. Now, the bill had come due. She wondered if there was any way back. As dusk fell over the city, Aaliyah sat on her bedroom floor, scrolling through messages. Some were hateful, but most were full of love. One caught her breath because of you. I went back to my bank today and demanded they explain why my loan was denied. They reopened my file. Thank you. She stared at the message for a long time, realizing she wasn't just part of a story anymore. She was part of a wave. Downstairs, Simone took a call from Leonard Price. He was careful with his words, but his tone was almost deferential. "Dr. Carter, the board is prepared to formalize your proposals. We'd also like to meet to discuss expanding them bank-wide." Simone smiled faintly. "Then we're beginning to understand each other." The following week, Jefferson First Trust convened a press conference in Riverton. Cameras and microphones crowded the hotel ballroom. Journalists filled every seat, their laptops glowing as they prepared to record a moment that had already captured the country's attention. Robert Hayes stood at the podium first, his expression taut. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we begin a new chapter for Jefferson First Trust. We acknowledge the harm done to Miss Aaliyah Carter. We apologize to her, to Dr. Simone Carter, and to every customer who has ever felt unseen in our institutions. But words alone are not enough. Today, we commit to structural change." Behind him, a banner read Dignity First Initiative. Reporters scribbled furiously as Hayes outlined new measures, mandatory anti-bias training, quarterly equity audits, and a $1 million reinvestment fund for underserved communities. Then he gestured to the front row. "We are honored to have Miss Carter and Dr. Carter here to speak for themselves." The crowd shifted as Simone and Aaliyah walked to the stage. Simone wore a deep burgundy suit, her calm presence commanding attention. Aaliyah, in a simple navy dress, looked nervous at first, but when she saw Jasmine filming from the aisle, she straightened her shoulders. Simone took the podium. "My family did not seek this spotlight, but dignity is not a privilege. It is a right. What happened at Jefferson First was not just a mistake. It was a reflection of a system that tells black families time and again that their presence is suspicious, their resources undeserved, their dignity optional. That ends here. Applause rippled through the room. Then, in a move no one expected, Simone stepped aside. My daughter will speak now. Aaliyah gripped the podium with both hands. Her voice wavered on the first sentence, but steadied as she went on. I walked into that bank with a check and a schedule. I left with the whole world watching. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be seen as a customer. But since I don't get that choice, I'll use this moment for more than myself. She paused, glancing at the cameras. The audits I'll be part of aren't just for Jefferson First. They're for every teenager who's been doubted, every parent who's been dismissed, every person who's been told they don't belong. This isn't about one deposit. It's about every door that's been slammed in our faces. The applause this time was thunderous. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Simone watched from the side, pride and worry mingling in her eyes. Jasmine posted the clip within minutes. By nightfall, it had over 10 million views. People began sharing their own At Your Dignity First Stories videos of confrontations, testimonies of quiet resilience, photos of families demanding respect in schools, hospitals, and offices. In corporate boardrooms across the country, executives debated whether they would be the next Jefferson First. Some began drafting their own reforms preemptively. Others scoffed, dismissing the movement as temporary noise. But the noise was not fading. At Riverton High, Aaliyah found herself at the center of hushed conversations in hallways. Some students treated her like a celebrity, asking for selfies. Others eyed her with envy or resentment. She felt the divide acutely, but she carried herself as she always had, quiet, steady, unyielding. Her debate coach pulled her aside after practice. You know, Aaliyah, you've done more for civic discourse in 2 weeks than some politicians do in decades. Aaliyah smiled faintly. I didn't mean to. Sometimes the best leaders are the ones who don't chase it, he said. Meanwhile, Patricia Collins lived in near isolation. Her home felt like a cage, the blinds always drawn. She scrolled through endless commentary about herself online. Some called her a villain, others mocked her downfall. A few defended her, insisting she was being scapegoated, but none of it eased the hollow pit in her chest. Her son confronted her one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway. Mom, you ruined everything. Not just for you, for me too. Do you know what it's like being the racist lady's kid at school? Tears stung Patricia's eyes. I made a mistake. No, he snapped. You made a choice, and now I'm paying for it. He stormed out, leaving her alone in the dim kitchen. Patricia realized, for the first time, that her actions had consequences that no termination letter could capture. At headquarters, Leonard Price read Simone's op-ed again, this time with new eyes. He had resisted at first, but now he saw the momentum building. Fighting it would be suicide. If we don't change, he muttered to himself, we won't survive. He picked up the phone and called Simone directly. Dr. Carter, the board would like to discuss expanding the Dignity First initiative across all branches, not just Riverton. Simone allowed herself the smallest smile. That's a start. But she knew it was only the beginning. That night, Aaliyah sat on her balcony, notebook open. She scribbled down reflections not just about banks, but about every space where people felt small. Schools, hospitals, airports. She wasn't sure yet what it meant, but she felt the weight of something bigger than herself. She looked up at the stars, the quiet night pressing close around her. For the first time since the incident, she didn't feel powerless. She felt like a spark in a much larger fire. And though she was still 16, she whispered to herself, "This isn't just my story anymore. It's ours." The following days carried a strange rhythm, half progress, half reckoning. Jefferson. First branches across the state scrambled to roll out new training programs. Local newspapers ran headlines about the Carter effect, dissecting every step of the reforms. Yet in Riverton, the air was still heavy with tension. Aaliyah found herself walking through familiar streets that no longer felt the same. Strangers greeted her with gratitude, sometimes with awe. A grocery store cashier leaned in after scanning her items and whispered, "Thank you for standing up. My sister went through the same thing at a different bank." A school custodian paused while sweeping the hallway, his eyes kind. "You gave us all a little courage, Miss Carter," but not all the attention was welcome. In the cafeteria, a group of students muttered as she passed, "She thinks she's famous now." Another whispered, "Her mom just pulled strings. That's all." Aaliyah heard it, but didn't flinch. She was learning the hardest lesson of all. Victory doesn't silence envy. At the Carter household, Simone juggled the growing demands of her corporate role with the new responsibility of being a movement's reluctant face. Invitations poured in panels, interviews, conferences. She declined most, protecting her daughter's space. Still, the pressure mounted. Late one night, she sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, staring at her laptop screen. Robert Hayes' email blinked in her inbox. "Dr. Carter, we are facing internal resistance. Some executives believe your demands set a dangerous precedent. They are lobbying to water down the reforms. I need your support in the upcoming board vote." Simone leaned back, fatigue settling over her. She wanted to rest, but knew rest wasn't an option yet. She drafted a curt reply. "Mr. Hayes, weakening these reforms is not an option. Should the board fail to implement them, I will consider moving all Carter Global accounts elsewhere. Choose wisely." At that same hour, Patricia Collins sat alone at her dining room table. Bills piled around her, unopened envelopes scattered like fallen leaves. Her phone buzzed again, and again calls she ignored, messages she couldn't face. Her world had shrunk to the size of a silent house. Finally, she picked it up and dialed a number she hadn't dared before. The line rang twice. "Hello," Simone's voice was calm, measured. Patricia froze, her throat dry. "Dr. Carter, this is Patricia Collins." There was a long pause. "I know who you are." Patricia swallowed hard. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the cameras, not for the press. Just sorry. I see my son's face every day, and he looks at me like I'm a stranger. I ruined everything. I don't know how to fix it." Simone was silent for a long moment. "Patricia, you can't erase what happened, but you can decide what happens next. Accountability isn't the end, it's the beginning. Do the work, not for me, not for Aaliyah, for your son, for yourself." Patricia's tears came hot and fast. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You'll find out," Simone said simply, and then the line went dead. The next morning, Patricia applied for a volunteer position at a community credit union. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sliver of purpose. Meanwhile, at Jefferson First headquarters, Leonard Price presided over the most contentious board meeting in years. Around the polished table, voices clashed. "This initiative gives outsiders too much influence." One executive argued. Outsiders Marjorie Kane cut in sharply. Our largest shareholder and her daughter are not outsiders. They're the reason this bank still has a chance." Hayes spoke up, his voice steady. "If we roll back now, we lose not just the Carters, but every customer watching this unfold. We will become the face of corporate cowardice." Silence fell. Leonard looked around the room, reading the unspoken truth in their eyes. Resistance was futile. The vote passed. The Dignity First initiative was locked in, binding every branch to the reforms. That evening, Aaliyah sat on the porch steps, watching the sun dip low. Jasmine arrived, her camera slung over her shoulder. "I just came from the credit union," Jasmine said. Settling beside her, guess who was there? Patricia Collins. She was filing paperwork, looking like she'd aged 10 years. Aaliyah blinked, unsure how to feel. "Do you think she'll actually change?" Jasmine shrugged. "I don't know. But the fact that she showed up, it means something." They sat in silence for a while, cicadas buzzing in the humid air. Finally, Aaliyah spoke. "I don't want to hate her. I just don't want anyone else to feel like I did that day." Jasmine lifted her camera and snapped a photo of Aaliyah against the fading sky. "That's why people follow you. You don't just call out the problem, you carry the hope too." The photo would later circulate online with the caption, "Quiet Power, Loud Impact." Across town, Simone prepared for another battle. She knew reforms on paper meant nothing without vigilance. But for the first time since the incident, she allowed herself a small exhale. Change, however fragile, was in motion. And as Aaliyah closed her notebook for the night, she felt something she hadn't in weeks. Not just exhaustion, not just resolve, but possibility. 6 months later, Riverton looked different. Jefferson First Trust's downtown branch had been renovated bright. Open spaces replaced marble barriers, new multilingual signage welcomed customers, and a community board displayed flyers for financial literacy workshops funded by the new initiative. What once felt like a fortress now felt like a gathering place. On a crisp morning, Aaliyah walked through the glass doors with her backpack slung over one shoulder. She wasn't here for a deposit today. She was here for her first quarterly review as part of the Oversight Committee. Employees greeted her warmly. "Good morning. Miss Carter. Welcome back." Aaliyah, Marcus Johnson, a newly hired community engagement manager, approached with a smile. He was young, black, and radiated the kind of energy that made people feel seen. "We've been preparing for your review all week," he said, handing her a binder. "The numbers are promising." In Robert Hayes's office, Aaliyah settled into the same leather chair where months earlier she had sat under suspicion. This time, the atmosphere was different, respectful, almost reverent. Hayes looked healthier, calmer, his tie slightly loosened. "We've implemented every requirement, Dr. Carter outlined. Hayes reported. Complaint rates have dropped. New account openings in underserved neighborhoods are up 50%, and employee satisfaction has risen dramatically." Aaliyah leafed through the binder, scanning graphs and survey responses. "Representation matters," she said softly. "When people see staff who look like them, trust follows." Hayes nodded, and when leadership listens, change follows. From the hallway, Simone appeared, her presence as commanding as ever. "The numbers are good," she said, glancing at the charts. "But numbers alone don't tell the story. What matters is how people feel when they walk in." She turned to her daughter. "Would you like to see for yourself? Together." They walked the floor. Aaliyah stopped at a teller's desk where a middle-aged Latina woman named Sofia Rodriguez explained a new mortgage program in Spanish to a young couple. At another counter, a Somali immigrant, received help opening his first business account. The air buzzed with an energy of inclusion Aaliyah had never seen before in a bank. In the waiting area, she spotted Jasmine with her ever-present camera. She had been invited to document the transformation. "Looks different, doesn't it?" Jasmine whispered, snapping a candid photo of Aaliyah and Simone. "Completely," Aaliyah replied. By noon, the branch hosted a small ceremony. Leonard Price stood at the podium, his voice less hesitant now. 6 months ago, this institution nearly lost its credibility. Today, thanks to the Carter family's courage, we are leading a national movement. Over 200 banks have adopted the Dignity First protocol. What began as one teenager's ordeal has become an industry standard. Applause filled the room. Aaliyah felt her cheeks warm, but she stood tall. She hadn't asked for this role, but she understood it now. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached, clutching her purse nervously. It was Mrs. Whitaker, the same customer who months earlier had muttered about people knowing their place. She looked smaller now, humbled. "I came to apologize, Mrs." Whitaker said softly, "I was wrong that day. I've thought about it ever since. My granddaughter showed me your speech online. She said, 'Grandma, this is why we march.'" Aaliyah studied her face, then nodded. "Thank you for saying that. Change starts with admitting we were wrong." "Mrs." Whitaker's eyes glistened. "I'm learning. Slowly, but I am learning." Later that evening, the Carter household felt lighter than it had in months. Simone prepared dinner while Aaliyah worked on her history essay at the kitchen table. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, mingling with the sound of jazz from the radio. Jasmine stopped by to drop off a flash drive of footage. She leaned against the counter, grinning. The video from today is already going viral. People are calling it the Riverton Renewal. Simone chuckled. "Let's just hope they remember it's more than a hashtag. It's a responsibility." After dinner, Aaliyah retreated to her room. She opened her journal and wrote, 6 months ago, "I was just a girl trying to make a deposit. Today, I am part of something bigger. Not because I wanted it, but because dignity demanded it." She paused, tapping her pen against the page. Maybe quiet power really does move mountains. Meanwhile, at a modest community credit union across town, Patricia Collins filed paperwork at her desk. She had completed the bias training program and now worked helping families with financial counseling. She wasn't the same manager who once called the cops on a teenager. Her face bore lines of regret, but also resolve. Each time she helped a struggling family secure a loan or explained credit scores with patience, she felt a small piece of redemption. Her son visited that night, dropping his backpack by the door. "Mom," he said cautiously, "my teacher talked about the Dignity First movement today. I told the class you're working at a credit union now." For the first time, I wasn't embarrassed. I was proud. Patricia's throat tightened. She whispered, "Thank you." Back in Riverton, the city council announced that a plaque would be installed outside the Jefferson First branch. It would read, "Change begins when courage meets consequence. Riverton, 2025." On the day of the unveiling, Aaliyah stood before the polished bronze with Simone and Jasmine at her side. Reporters snapped photos as she touched the plaque's cool surface. She remembered the sting of Janet Morrison's words, the flashing police lights, the taste of fear in her mouth. And she remembered how she refused to shrink. In her speech, she kept it simple. "This plaque isn't about me. It's about what happens when people speak up, when communities demand better, when institutions decide dignity is non-negotiable. Quiet power isn't loud, but it's steady, and steady power changes the world. The crowd erupted into applause, not just for her, but for the possibility she represented. That night, as city lights blinked across the horizon, Simone and Alia sat together on the balcony, wrapped in blankets against the cool air. Simone handed her daughter a mug of tea. "You've carried a heavy burden, sweetheart, but look at what's growing from it." Alia sipped her tea, her gaze steady on the skyline. "It's not just my burden, it's everyone's. But maybe we can build something better." Simone smiled, her arm wrapping around her daughter's shoulders. "We already are, and for the first time, Alia believed it. This story reminds us that respect is never a privilege, it is a basic right." A young girl walked into a bank expecting fairness and left carrying the weight of injustice. Yet what could have been another silent wound became a turning point because someone refused to look away. For those of us who have lived long enough, we know that dignity is often tested in quiet. Ordinary places, a waiting room, a store counter, a bank. The lesson here is that true strength does not always shout. Sometimes it simply refuses to bend. And when dignity is defended, not just for ourselves, but for others, change ripples far beyond that single moment. We can all carry this into our lives. Whether you are a grandparent teaching respect, a leader making decisions, or simply a neighbor watching someone struggle, your choice matters. Will you let silence be your answer, or will you stand gently but firmly for what is right? Justice may begin in one person's pain, but it grows into a community's promise when we dare to act with courage and compassion. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep these powerful stories alive and spread the message of dignity, respect, and hope.